realized is an ongoing process. There are no utopias or final frontiers. All things change and are in a continuous process of social evolution. Thank you.
Said it all. I just want to add a little bit to it, and that is that the world we live in, the language we use today, was designed hundreds of years ago, and that makes it almost impossible to talk to one another. We really talk at each other. Now that's very hard to conceive of because we're brought up in a world where that appears normal. And in ancient Rome, they used to feed Christians lions. But they would starve the lions, put on a better show, about a week without food. And they'd remove the clothing from the Christians so it'd make it easier for the lions to tear them apart. And families used to come on weekends, or whenever they had the show, to watch Christians being fed to lions. And children would say, "Daddy, can I come next week to see Christians fed for lions?" And Daddy would say, "If you behave yourself." Well, is anything wrong with Daddy? Nothing is wrong. That's normal to their society. Just as your society watches prize fights, men punching each other's heads around. There's a brain in there. It's always damaged. But the things we like to see, a tightrope walker walking between buildings, automobiles going around in circles doing nothing, these are the things we get conditioned to. And we think, I guess, that's human nature. There's no such thing as human nature. All people are shaped by culture. For example, if you, I don't know you, were raised as a baby by the headhunters of the Amazon, if he never saw anything else, he'd be a headhunter. And if I said to him, "Doesn't it bother you to have 5 shrunken heads?" He says, "Yes, my brother has 20. Is he a bad guy? No. Everybody is perfectly well adjusted where they're coming from. If you're brought up in the South, you're going to speak with a Southern accent. If you're brought up in France, La Tour Eiffel, Vive la France. You know, and if you're brought up in Germany, Heil Hitler, Deutschland über alles. Anything wrong with the German families? No. They're brought up in a fixed, closed culture. So all of us are shamefully inadequate. They do not teach in school how to relate to one another, how to get along, how to find meaning in your own lives. They teach you how to be a cog in the wheel, become a mechanic, a doctor, a lawyer, or a structural engineer, but never overview. They never tell you how people get to be the way they are. I'm going to try in this short time to tell you a little bit of how people get to be the way they are. When I was 21, I worked my way onto a boat to Hawaii and from there to Tahiti. And I wanted to see how people would be if they weren't brought up the way we were. And I got to Tahiti. It seemed that the Chinese owned most of the stores then, and they had a money system going. So I wanted some out islands that were relatively untouched. And that's called the Tuamotu chain. This was 65 years ago. And so when I got there, I brought mirrors and beads, which I was going to give out to the natives to show I come as a friend. But they were already in my hut giving out the mirrors and beads with a great big grin on their face. And of course I didn't understand it, coming from a monetary system. I said, "What's going on?" They said, "You have too many mirrors and beads." So they were giving them out. I did not understand that until about 3 days later, when the older people were pulling in a net full of fish, and they threw fish to anyone standing there. They'd say, "You owe me $10, you owe me $4. They just gave it away. But the most surprising thing is that they were walking around without clothing, all of them, men and women, except a few men that climb trees, made a kind of a jock strap so their balls won't get caught in the branches. But other than that, they did walk around nude, and I never saw a male stare at a female body because they've been swimming nude ever since they were kids. There were no fetishes. No tit men, leg men, ass men, hair men. Gone. Because they were brought up nude swimming together. There were no girly magazines that guys bought because there was nothing to see. If you think about it, if you cover a girl's nose and say to a guy, "Do you ever see a girl's nose?" He says, "No, show him a little bit. He'll have to loosen his collar," if he's brought up to that. There's nothing about the female body that stimulates men. They think that's human nature. That's the way men are. That isn't the way they are. That's the way they're brought up. And also in the islands, they made love wherever they wanted to when they were old enough to. There was no seduction. You didn't have to play a violin, take a girl out to a harmonious environment with good food and seduce her. Gone. When they were young enough, they had sex and nobody ever talked about it. That's all men talk about in this culture. And women think that's how men are. Again, they're not. They're made that way. Don't get mad at them. They're made that way by this culture. If you still don't understand that, when the men in the islands made love to a woman, they put their hands on top of the woman and said, "Me like you." They stroked the whole female. There were no peeping toms, because it wouldn't occur if everybody would swim nude. There were no sex crimes, because they had sex. So the church came along and said, "You only use sex when you get married." If that were true, the pecker would come out the day you got married. This whole story that you get, to be truthful, be honest. When kids come over to you and say, "What brings babies here?" "The stork." That's a lie. Where do you get all those gifts on Christmas? Papa, Mama? No, Santa Claus. That's another lie. We lie continuously, then we pump our kids full of shit. We pump them. You're a Lutheran, you're proud of it. You're a Catholic, you're proud of it. You're an American, you're proud of it. And you're Irish, and you're proud of it. Well, if any normal boy or girl was brought up in Ireland, they'd speak a certain way. The facial expressions such as, "He's a fine Irish lad, probably from Dublin." Well, you'd speak that way. If you're brought up in Australia, you'd probably say things like, "How are you, mate?" So, is that inborn? Of course not. You pick it up from your environment. Thank you. If you have difficulty understanding that, a man brought up in the South or a woman will speak with a Southern accent. If you said, "Stop speaking with a Southern accent," they can't. And they'd say things like this: "I'm gonna get me a nigger and I'm gonna kick his ass." Is that inborn? No, he picks it up in the environment. And the geneticists are looking for the Republican gene. They're looking for the Democratic gene or the gay gene. There's no such thing. It's environment that shapes your values, behavior, and your facial expressions. And if you were brought up in Germany and all you see is Heil Hitler, Deutschland over alles, Germany above all, brought up in America, the greatest country in the world, all that's bullshit. The world you live in is a bullshit world. Now those of you that are bothered by language, too bad. Anyway.